Hello, dear listener, and thank you for checking out Something Rotten. We talk about pretty awful games in this show generally, and I put content warnings in the description for most episodes, but I do want to just do one in front of this whole season because, boy, there are some wretched topics that we go into in the show, including but not limited to extended discussions of sexual abuse and suicide. So if either of those things are things that you don't want to consider for any reason, here's just a heads up: it's going to be pretty hard to avoid.
In my restless dreams, I see that tune.
Hello and welcome back to Something Rotten. This is the season finale of our series on Silent Hill. Blake Hester is here. My name is Jacob Geller. It's been a while.
Oh my god, Jacob. We haven't recorded and Alright, let's see. Jacob, do you see this curtain I have in front of my camera?
No, I don't.
I'm pulling it back to give a peek behind.
Oh my goodness.
Something Rotten. An incredible podcast. Maybe not the most thought out podcast, because we were like, what if we recorded every day for 8 months? And this has been the longest break we've ever had, which has been about a month. It's been while I've been in Louisville. We recorded the Resident Evil 4 Separate Ways thing on Nebula. Nebula.tv/something.
Check it out.
If you want to check that out, Michael Larry was the guest. It was very great. But that was when I first got here. That was like the first week I was here. Then an entire month has passed. I haven't spoken a damn word to you.
No, we have not played Fortnite at all.
No.
We haven't talked about how Retail Row is back.
And we haven't been talking about how we're trying to get those retail.
I'm not going to... This is your bit.
All right. Anyway, what's up?
Yeah, it's been... You know, it's funny because I have been playing and beating so many games over this month, and I've been like, wow, why do I have like so much time to like play games now? It's like, oh yeah, because I'm not recording like 4 seasons of Something Rotten within 2 months. We are here today because the listeners have sent in a truly incredible volume and quality of questions. We have so many that were sent to somethingrottenpodcast@gmail.com that if we don't read your question, it's not because it was bad. It's just because we had so many of these to answer. But I can't wait to dive into them. Before we do, though, because it's been a month since we played the Silent Hill games, you had any more thoughts on them? Have you been like thinking about Silent Hill 2 or 3?
I mean, I have, but it's been really fascinating. So I've been back in my hometown, and I've been with the goons, my boys. And my boy Tay has never played. What's up, Tay? I know you're listening. Love you, brother. I'll see you at Pastime later. We're going to get some fried fish. Can't wait for that shit.
He's never played Silent Hill 2?
He's never played Silent Hill 3.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, Brother Bear, don't you worry. I have a completely legal copy just sitting on my PC right now. You can come over and play it. And it's really interesting watching someone else play Silent Hill 3. Because those games are so inscrutable. When you're in the moment, when you're playing it, you're just in the zone. You're just figuring it out. But as a passive observer, I was just like laying on that couch watching him. It's like watching help me out here. What's a good metaphor?
I know what you're saying. It's like I don't know, watching someone else put together a jigsaw puzzle or something, where it's just kind of like they're just failing until they're not.
Also, I think I talked about this on the show, but the keybinds for my PC version were so borked that I had to just like...
Yeah, I had the same thing.
I had to completely wrap my head around the most unbelievable control scheme of all time, and it became second nature after a while. Trying to explain it to Taylor and just be like, all right, so your inventory is tied to the left thumbstick. Click it in if you want to check your inventory was really a trip. And Anyway, that's been my major
And we
thought.
should make clear that this is a different Taylor playing Silent Hill than the Taylor that we had on our bonus episode available on Nebula talking about Silent
Can
Hill.
I say something?
Yes.
I never put it together that their name was Taylor.
Yes, Tails is a Taylor.
Wow.
You learn something new every day.
I'm not saying I thought their name was Tails, but I never was like, what would their name actually be? Just Tails to me. Wow.
2 Tales, 2 Silent Hills. Let's start with 2 questions, Blake, that are kind of similar to each other.
Okay, you want to go? Do you want me to go?
I'll go. Mitchell writes in and says, horror has always been a genre very concerned with gender. Playing Silent Hill 2 for the first time to follow along with the podcast and listening to the Silent Hill 3 sections, the series seems a lot more focused on femininity itself rather than telling more common stories where women adopt masculine violence. See basically every slasher. Are there any other horror stories you recommend that take a similar approach? And then Felix wrote in and said, as a trans man, one of the things that's been on my mind throughout every season is how distinctly masculine these rotten games are. I even thought it ought to be listed as one of the defining qualities of rotten games. Even The Last of Us, which stars a female cast, feels haunted by masculinity. However, this season on Silent Hill, specifically on Silent Hill 3, finally provides an extremely feminine game that is rotten to the core. I just wanted to ask your guys' general thoughts on how gender plays into rotten games and what other feminine rotten media might be out there. Blake, I feel like you were excited about this question.
I thought about I was definitely the first question because I felt like I had some good recos for Mitchell here. One, I haven't played Rule of Rose, but I have been told mainly in our emails that Rule of Rose is a very good game to follow up Silent Hill 3 with. So
Right.
It is the second most rare PS2 game of all time, so maybe try to figure out a different way to play that. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Hey, how do you feel about Gore Verbinski's Pirates of the Caribbean? But some films you could check out, of course, are Andrei Zulawski's masterwork, Possession. Jacob, please watch it. We talked about it on the Nebula bonus podcast with Tales. Possession, one of not only the greatest horror films of all time, one of the greatest films of all time, really centers itself on, not unlike Gone Girl, which I just recently watched, the horrors of being married and whether or not you can really know a spouse, and what if one of them is fucking a demon.
And you think that the it's the horror is specifically feminine based?
I don't think
it's like is it like, being scared of masculine violence or is
I
it?
think that's a facet of it for sure, because the husband uses his dominant position in the relationship to inflict violence upon his wife at points. But I mean the movie also does a lot of role reversals on the typical, like, I don't know, fictional portrayal of dominant and submissive participants in marriages, which I think is very fascinating. And I think by the end, the wife in that relationship has completely flipped the script on what kind of like marriage-based thrillers or horror films can be, in really fascinating ways. Another one we talked about, I believe, on the bonus pod, this is just the bonus pod at this point, is Raw, a film very obsessed. It's by Julia DeCarno, I don't know how to pronounce her name. The director of Teton. She won the Palme d'Or a couple years ago. It's specifically about puberty for teenage girls. It's also a cannibal film. It's also maybe an allegory for being a vegetarian, or maybe not being vegetarian, now that I think about it. Great stuff.
I have a my roommate. You know what? Actually, I don't think it's Raw. I think it was my former roommate was telling me that she watched Raw and was like, okay, I can like deal with this, and then watched another movie that you have brought up on this podcast, I think, and had to turn it off halfway through, but I'm trying to remember what it was. Like another French Extremity.
I mean, I've talked about Inside, Martyrs.
Is there? I think it was Is someone flayed alive?
Yeah, Martyrs.
In Martyrs.
Martyrs.
Yeah, okay, that's what it was. She was like, I was watching it, I was having a pretty hard time, and then I looked up the plot summary and saw that I hadn't got to the part where someone was flayed alive yet and decided to check out.
We talked about Martyrs on the Silent Hill bonus pod, because
That's right.
that is a movie about a religious cult torturing someone to bring about like enlightenment. Last couple one is the Sleepaway Camp. I'm in no position to talk about the gender stuff in Sleepaway Camp. You can look it up. A lot of trans writers have written about it. There's a lot going on with gender in that film. And Visitor Q, one of Takashi Miike's most notoriously gross films, I think has a really interesting scene about middle-aged women and their sexuality and taking control of it. It's not a horror film. It's like a kind of a dark, jet black comedy. But anyway, I have one more in there, but I don't think that one's actually.
Yeah, hey, look, save some for the next bonus pod. Let's talk about the second question. Our general thoughts on how gender plays into rotten games and what other feminine rotten media might be out there. Second part, you kind of answered. The first part is interesting, though, and we talked a little about this on the Silent Hill 3 pods, but like a defining aspect of most of our rotten games has been misogyny specifically. You know, that it's like women are in it and the games seem to hate them. And so playing Silent Hill 3 is interesting because it's like very specifically a horror game about being a woman, but the game doesn't seem to hate women, which I would say about, Kane and Lynch or Max Payne.
I don't think like rotten media is specifically masculine, right? Because I just brought up a ton of films that are rotten that are not like inherently focused on men. I just think video games are misogynistic as a medium, and that's why we play so many like masculine rotten games.
Yeah, I was doing a talk at a class recently and was asked about kind of the gender divide, and I feel like something that I always need to say is like men don't play more video games than women.
Right.
Like the gender split on gaming is pretty even, but the kinds of games that men and women play are at least marketed very differently, even if, there are women who play Call of Duty and whatever, but it seems like COD is marketed to men, Sims is marketed to women, etc. Like that sort of thing.
I think that's a very smart point to bring up. I think like the one counterpoint is there's a pretty solid scale tipping in men's favor on who directs video games.
Yes, well, and so what I was going to say is just like it seems like the gender scales are so divided by genre that like we really don't get to see like there is, and obviously this is all people's personal preference can cross these lines and whatever, but like you don't see a lot of like first person shooter games made kind of targeting women. Like that's not really a thing that exists on a large scale in the industry yet. And certainly these kind of games that we're talking about, I think an interesting counterexample and a game that I really think we should play and obviously ties into Silent Hill is Signalis is a game that is like really interested in gender and relationships and like transness very specifically, but is like a violent, gross game in the same way as Silent Hill 2 or 3. But it's like, even that, it's like, if there's a game that's going to exist like that, it's going to be kind of indie because the support for like a big AAA production just doesn't really seem there. And The Last of Us is maybe the closest we've got, but as Felix pointed out, all of the violence in The Last of Us feels kind of haunted by the specter of masculinity, even if it's done by women.
If you want to read more about like the gender divide in video games and how in the toy industry and how that is something just idiot men in an office completely fabricated a long time ago and has cursed us forever. One of Polygon's best stories of all time is called No Girls Allowed. It's written by Tracy Leon in 2013. Sorry if I mispronounced your last name, Tracy. I don't think you're listening, but sorry nonetheless. If you just Google No Girls Allowed Polygon, it'll pop right up. It's a fantastic story. It's one of the best pieces of video game journalism of all time, and you can read all about it. Anyway, You ready to move on?
Hell yeah. Yeah, you want to read this next one?
This comes from Rory H. Smiley face. Your conversation with Super Eye Patch Wolf about the Silent Hill 2 soundtrack got me listening to it, and man, it is so good. My question is, how do you guys feel the soundtrack of Silent Hill 2 contributes to the game, and how does it alter your experience of the game? Any other games that you feel are deeply affected by their soundtracks? I think I'm going to ignore the parts of the soundtrack that are the Trent Reznor banging on pots and pans synth sound.
Right.
Because that's obviously very scary. I think the interesting part of the game's soundtrack are the rock songs. And they function in this completely radical way of helping manipulate your emotions in ways that most video games don't. Like, video games are so obsessed with like sweeping orchestral music, which is great and fine, but rarely you just get like the thing about rock music is it's the music of the people. You know, it's a working class genre, and it speaks straight to your soul. So I think it's like, it sounds unique because you don't hear a lot of like soundtracks like that in games, especially not in horror. But I also think it just like helps tell you how to feel about things, because rock music is so expressive in a way that other genres aren't, that like for such emotional games, like they really help guide your feelings in the right way.
Well, I think the specific question about Silent Hill's soundtrack is good because it's like, oh, look, I'm someone who loves soundtracks. I listen to them constantly. I score my videos with, music taken from games and whatever. But I think there is a difference in how Silent Hill 2 uses its soundtrack than a lot of other games, which is essentially like, if you think about the Journey soundtrack, the soundtrack to Journey, unquestionably one of the most beautiful video game soundtracks. I think if you look at that game without the soundtrack, you are already kind of getting the vibe the soundtrack gives you, and then the soundtrack pushes it over the edge. Whereas, I think if you look at Silent Hill 2, there's very little that would indicate that it would have the kind of like rock soundtrack that it does.
Right.
Like I think the soundtrack is doing something very different than like the other aesthetics of the game, and I think that's really fascinating when like the game is doing something and then the soundtrack is kind of doing something else, and those two things combine in a way that then creates like a new feeling. Whereas, like there are a million games with beautiful soundtracks, but a lot of times those are kind of, you look at the game and you could kind of expect what it would sound like just by the other aesthetics of it. And I think what is really cool is when like the soundtrack is able to kind of subvert what you think the game would sound like and thus give you something else. It's one of the like the oldest trick in the book, but like scoring a very violent scene with an upbeat pop song, think like Reservoir Dogs or whatever, is like, that is why those scenes are funny, is because there's like a tension created between the sound and the imagery. And I think that's what's cool about Silent Hill 2 is you have this weird, and 3 and like all of the Silent Hill soundtracks, is you have this weird tension going on. I'm kind of trying to think of other games that do similar things where like the soundtrack is not necessarily what you would expect.
Well, one very specific part of Alan Wake 2.
Oh, yes it does. We will have words about that.
Yeah, Jacob, it's really been bumming me. Granted, I beat the game, very early. It's been bumming me out going on Twitter and seeing people just tweeting about that. I'm like, that's such a bummer that that's being spoiled for people. Because if you don't know it's coming...
if people want to be spoiled, they should listen to the Nebula spoiler cast of Alan Wake 2 coming out soon. I think the last level of Max Payne 3 having the that health song with lyrics is really cool. I mean, like, games with lyrics in general, I think are able to kind of do this more. Obviously the soundtrack cutting out in Hotline Miami is a pretty vital part of that experience. Like, the game kind of sounds like you would expect up until it suddenly doesn't. But yeah, Silent Hill 2 soundtrack, best ever do.
Any other games you feel are deeply affected by their soundtracks? I mean, Hotline Miami.
Yeah, I think, Disco Elysium, Bayonetta, There are a lot of games. I think almost every game is deeply affected by its soundtrack, because music is like basically the most important thing you can use to affect someone's emotions.
Nier Automata.
Ooh. Nier Automata would be almost unplayable, I think, if it did not have that soundtrack.
How stoked are you to play Nier Automata for this podcast next year?
Did I say I would do that?
I feel like you did.
Okay, sure. Let's do it. I saw a Sunni Legend gif of like stunting on someone in Nier Automata this morning, and I was like, fuck, that looks so good. I know the combat's not actually that good in that game, but like, oh boy.
The thing about Nier Automata, Jacob, is it is the greatest game ever made. Anyway, let's move on.
Blake, you knew what the real villain of Metal Gear Solid is?
Yeah, nuclear proliferation.
Okay, yeah, but...
Oh, you mean giant sick robots.
No, I was going...
Oh, you meant the controls for the sniper rifle.
No, Blake, the real villain of Metal Gear Solid is a lack of data security.
You're just saying that because we're being sponsored by NordVPN.
Think about it, man. People are constantly getting one over on Snake because his codec is like wide open and anyone can listen in.
I feel like you're making this sound dumber by connecting it to that game. The fact is, VPNs should just kind of be part of your internet infrastructure at this point.
It actually is for me, and not just because I'm smarter than Solid Snake. I've used VPNs when traveling to different countries so I could continue working like I was still at home in the US. I've also used them when doing research for my videos, or even for this show, because believe it or not, Blake, there's still a lot of websites that feel pretty unsafe to be on.
No way.
Using NordVPN, I know, I'm not going to pick up some tracker or malware or something. Snake, he could have
I'm just going to interrupt to tell our listeners that when they sign up with our code, nordvpn.com/rotten, they'll get bonus months on top of an annual plan. You don't need to make it about video games, Jacob. This is just something that normal adults who listen to our show should use. Also, there's a full 30-day money-back guarantee, so if they decide they don't want it for some reason, it's no big deal.
You're right. I shouldn't lean on Snake to make logical advertising pitches. Be a functioning adult and just visit nordvpn.com/rotten to get our special offer and protect yourself online.
Was that so hard?
Colonel, VPN, Nord.
Jacob, would you say you're a generous lover?
I hardly see how this is any of your business, but yeah, I'm a generous lover.
Well, maybe you should bring that to your podcast co-hosting once in a while. But nevertheless, I do have quite the website for you. This episode of Something Rotten is sponsored by AdamandEve.com. Adam and Eve empowers people to explore sex and their sexuality in a safe, inclusive, and welcoming environment. More than just a sex toy company, they're a trusted partner in helping you become your sexiest self.
I have always wanted to become my sexiest self.
Don't I know it? So check it out, Jacob. Right now, you can use the discount code ROTTEN for 50% off any one item, which is wild. Let's just be clear.
It's true. That's a good deal.
Yeah, that's wild. That rocks. But you can also, adding to how good this deal is, receive free shipping to the US and Canada and free rush processing, though some exclusions do apply on that last point.
Well, that sounds amazing, but do they have discreet shipping? I don't know that I need my mail person seeing that side of me.
They sure do have discreet shipping, as well as 24/7 customer support and a 90-day, no-hassle return policy. They got it all.
That's great. But Blake, did you know that Adam and Eve has been in business for over 50 years and donates 20% of all their profits to help fight the spread of HIV around the world?
All the more reason to go buy something. Use our discount code ROTTEN for 50% off one item, free shipping in the US and Canada, and free rush processing. Some exclusions apply. Jacob, you know what I love watching on the internet?
Blake, I'm going to politely remind you we are recording right now.
Movies, cinema, all kinds of movies from all over the world. But for reasons not fully worth exploring here, streaming services like Netflix, Hulu, and the like have different libraries based on which countries they're being used in.
Is that true?
True as the day is long. That's why I use NordVPN to unlock my computer's location, allowing me to watch Netflix in America, Japan, Albania, the USSR, Constantinople.
Oh, I don't know about the last two, but that's really interesting. They added a time travel feature. So you're saying I could use NordVPN to watch all my favorite anime before they come to America?
Sure can, but that's not all. Believe it or not, bad actors are doing their darndest to steal your information online.
Wait, what?
Yep, and you're helping them by not encrypting your data.
Oh my god. Annie, lock our doors! I'll explain later!
Yeah, don't get caught being a dummy and use NordVPN to protect yourself from malware, trackers, and ads. It'll also notify you if someone leaks your information online, and it helps you avoid those pesky CAPTCHAs and block lists.
Okay, sure, but is Nord tracking or sharing what I'm doing online?
Never! Your traffic is always protected with their robust encryption and their options to make sure your data is never exposed.
Okay, well that sounds great, but how do I sign up?
Well, Nord sponsored this episode, so we have a special link, nordvpn.com/somethingrotten. From there, you can get Nord apps on all your favorite platforms, and one account can be used on up to 6 freaking devices. They also have 24/7 customer support and a 30-day money-back guarantee.
Okay, I'm signing up right now. Let me just type this in, nordvpn.com/somethingrotten.
Probably the best thing you've ever done online, Jacob. Go to nordvpn.com/somethingrotten and sign up for NordVPN to watch all your favorite movies and, importantly, protect yourself on the information superhighway.
What about the information normal highway? Does it have to be super?
I'm looking for it. This is your question.
Oh, yes. Okay. Well, yeah, because this is a very important aspect. EJ Olson says, first off, I just wanted to say that finding something rotten has been one of the best things to happen to me this year. That rules. Yeah. I'm going to skip some of our self-congratulating, but EJ Olson, thank you very much. This season, I was really excited when you announced the season would be covering Silent Hill 2 and 3, since it was the first time you were covering a game I both hadn't played and was already interested in. So this season was the first time I ever played along with the show, although I did end up tapping out of Silent Hill 3 pretty quickly. This season has definitely felt heavier than the others to me, so I thought I'd give you a more lighthearted question. What do you think James Sunderland's cookout order would be?
It'd be
great question.
Something so foul.
I was talking to Annie about this before we started. I think he would not get the cookout tray because he's a dumb motherfucker and he doesn't know what's best for him. Cookout is a southern regional fast food chain for people listening who don't know the best fast food chain. I think he would get like a plain burger, like nothing on it.
It's not even gross enough. He'd get a salad. First off, he'd get whatever their excuse.
Get a hot salad.
Whatever their excuse for a salad is, which you know is like 80% ranch and cheese. And then he'd get...
Sounds good to me.
He'd get a ham sandwich, white bread, no mayo.
You're not, Blake, you're not playing by the cookout rules. You gotta look at their menu.
You telling me they don't got salads on their menu? I was just assuming.
I don't think they do. I also don't think they have ham sandwiches.
I was just assuming they do because they have everything on that menu. I'm pretty sure you could get caviar at Cookout. They have so much on that menu. Let me see. Cookout menu.
I think he would get a like a chili burger with no bun. You know?
Oh, yeah.
Just eat it with his hands like a little freak.
Hold on. I'm on insider.com.
The Cookout, looking at the Cookout menu feels like reading House of Leaves. Like the way that it's aligned.
You know what he would get? 3 cheese quesadillas and a medium water, no ice. That would be his order.
That's it. That's the one.
As it turns out, they do not have salads at Cookout, which blows my mind. But
it's because they're the best fast food chain.
They do have BLTs, so you can get lettuce at Cookout.
Did we talk about Heather saying it's bread?
No. The meme.
Classic.
Yeah.
That's a meme that's now being beaten into the ground by Silent Hill Ascension, giving you a sticker that says it's bread.
Let's not talk about Silent Hill Ascension. That's what I don't want to do.
Z the Stranger.
This is my question.
Writes in and asks a question that Blake's gonna read.
Despite her, this comes from Z the Stranger. Despite her similarity in origin to the monsters, it's made clear that Maria is a sentient and conscious person. With that in mind, are the monsters also sentient and conscious? An idea that seldom comes up. This is a look at what it's like to record our ads with me. An idea that seldom comes up as far as I've seen is that of the monsters being viewed as living creatures that might have thoughts and feelings under the surface. I love this question because I think one of the more interesting ideas of Silent Hill monsters is that they're deeply sad, which makes me think they're just depressed motherfuckers trapped in their own skin. So I
thought that you were going to bring up the source of our biggest fight on this show, which is the Silent Hill 3 idea, where the psychologist dickhead says, like, don't you know they're people? Ha 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 ha! You're killing people. But I think that Z the Stranger actually poses this question in a more interesting way, which is not like, are they living human beings, but just like, are they anything? You know, are they just like animated flesh, or do they have like, you know, some kind of personhood?
One of my favorite monsters in video games are actually the runners from The Last of Us.
Yeah.
Because occasionally when you're beating the piss out of a runner, they will show humanity. Mm-hmm. It very rarely happens in the game, and I've always thought that was very fascinating.
Well, and they've talked about, I mean, it's like their animation is kind of, they're not sprinting at you like 28 Days Later style. It's like they're kind of holding back, like it's, you know, a person trying to get away and the fungus trying to get you.
And I think that's kind of like what, like the not the mannequins or whatever, or the mosquitoes, but like specifically the things in Silent Hill 2 that look like they're in straitjackets. You know what I'm saying? They're like trapped.
Yeah, or like body bags.
Yeah. Like those, I just feel like there is a very sad person in there who like for 2 seconds an hour is like, oh my God, I'm a person. And they're like trapped again. Like, I think that's really cool. And that's what I've always imagined them to be like. The mannequins are just scary mannequins.
Yeah, it's like the mannequins kind of feel like nothing, as do the bugs. The nurses are interesting because they're so kind of objectified. You know, they're supposed to be like kind of sexy, that it's weird to think like, is that a person that's like then been made sexy by like James's mind or something? You know, it feels like he's manifesting this like objectified monster.
Here's the thing, James, like all of us, saw the album art to Enema of the State and never saw nurses the same way after. Shouts out to, I can't remember her name, it doesn't matter.
I think this is most true of the bosses.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the bosses certainly feel like, obviously the Angela's boss has personhood in a very kind of disgusting way, but like I do think that the bosses that you fight generally feel more than just like something fucked up that came out of their brain. You know, it feels like they are there somehow, like they're really having an effect on the world and being affected by the world and all that.
Next question.
Brooke writes with a correction. Gotta start this off with something I have to say, but I'm also sorry how many people you're gonna hear this from. Stanley Donwood isn't the stalker in the hospital. That's just some guy you accidentally slandered for a 2-hour episode. The stalker is Stanley Coleman.
There you go. Brooke.
Sorry, Stanley Donwood.
Brooke, I would like to add, though, thank you for writing in this correction, because you actually were the only person who wrote it in. So there we go.
Yeah, and and do you know who Stanley Donwood is?
No.
Because I have art by Stanley Donwood hanging in my house. He's the guy who's done like all the Radiohead cover art.
Why did we say Stanley Donwood?
I don't know. I mean, he's a very cool artist. I think he also did the art for my favorite book, Underland, by Robert McFarlane. You know, he did, if you can picture, like, I mean, basically the like Kid Amnesia exhibition, that was like a big Stanley Donwood collaboration, I'm pretty sure.
This must have been a Freudian slip on your part, because there's no way
I'm sure it
I
was.
would have pulled that out.
That's so funny. Anyway, Brooke continues, I don't actually think it would be that cool if the monsters were just regular people. If I'm barred from ever listening again, I accept my fate. By way of apology, I'm giving you a collection of weird textures I've noticed / ripped from Silent Hill 3. For no clear reason, a bunch of doors right at the start of the mall say fucking Yggdrasil on them, as in like the world tree from Norse mythology. And your inventory has such delectable typos as bullet of shotgun and fits to aid kit. I'm working on throwing the Something Rotten logo onto a shirt for Heather. That would be incredible. But I have to rebeat the game on my new PC before I can unlock the shirt myself and make sure the mods work. More on that.
That would be awesome.
That rules. Bullet of shotgun is very funny.
I also, Brooke, if you get that mod to work, I will stream the entirety of Silent Hill 3 on Twitch with it.
What if we made our first merch was a t-shirt with Heather wearing a shirt that said something rotten?
That would be sick. Also, here's a question for the listeners. Write into something. What's our email? somethingrottenpod@gmail.com?
Podcast. somethingrottenpodcast@gmail.com.
Or just tweet at Metallica's Rad. If you would buy Something Rotten merch and pay a respectable amount, let us know.
Yeah, like a non-sweatshop amount.
Weirdly enough,
it.
I was thinking about this yesterday, Jacob, and I don't think we've ever talked about this on the pod, but something I say a lot while we're playing Fortnite is like we'll be landing and there'll be a lot of people landing with us. I'll be like, oh, a lot of future corpses here, and I was like, that would be a really good Something Rotten shirt, is something that said future corpse on it.
Jesus.
Anyway,
yeah, that'd rule. I was thinking just to touch on the doors saying Yggdrasil. Do you know the thing with, I'm sure you do, with Evangelion, where it's got all that, like, all the Christian imagery and like whatever. And then Anno was kind of like, yeah, I just thought it was cool.
yeah.
You know, like there's not like a huge, sometimes I look, I am a fan of reading as deeply into anything as you want, but sometimes I do think people are just like, it'd be kind of cool if we did this.
No one can explain to me, though, why the Declaration of Independence is in Silent Hill 3.
Wait, where was that?
We talked about it on the show. It's just randomly a save thing in the game is like a torn up version of the Declaration of Independence.
You know, searching SH3 Declaration of Independence doesn't actually get you anything, but
I'm telling you, dude, it is in this game.
Oh yeah, no, you're right. Yeah. That's how weird.
Team Silent, man, geniuses.
Do you know the thing with like Wikipedia, the Star Wars Wikipedia, where it's like there's an entry for like toast on Wikipedia, and they're like, toast is toasted bread, which you can do with a laser toaster. It's like, I would love a Silent Hill version of the Declaration of Independence Wikipedia entry.
I need just like a gaming muse video that's like 3 hours long, where he just breaks down why the Declaration of Independence is in Silent Hill 3 and what it means. Next question comes from George. Hey, Blakeup. A lot of people have been writing in using Blakeup. This is like a thing I was noticing yesterday. It's either they'll like portmanteau both our names, or it'll be Jacob and Blakeup.
Jacob and Blakeup.
Something in the water out there. I was a bit surprised that both of you didn't like the Leave ending. It was the first ending I got, and I thought it was pretty good. I think a part of this is that I don't seem to have as much trouble sympathizing with James as much as you guys do, which sounds really bad, but let me explain where I'm coming from. My partner and I are very strongly in the right to die with dignity camp, and have had numerous morbid conversations that basically boil down to, oh God, if I'm not myself and or can't get better, please just kill me. So I guess maybe my personal bias kind of leaned me to interpreting Mary's killing just a bit differently. I think the text is ambiguous enough. She says that she both wants and does not want to die at various points, that you can interpret James' actions as slightly less cruel. He's still a bastard because his reasoning was completely selfish, but perhaps not an irredeemable one. It's a somewhat common trope. Person experiencing extreme caretaker fatigue finally snaps and kills a loved one that has become a burden due to no fault of their own. Of course, we're never given all the details of how everything went down, but that's kind of my point. Anyways, love the show, and hope you interpret this email charitably and don't think one of your fans is a would-be wife murderer. Sincerely, George. P.S. I love my wife. I am also with you, George. I think the right to die with dignity completely... Jacob, I'll take it a step further. I think assisted suicide should be legal. Kevorkian, innocent. But I think Mary might have wanted to die in some part of her brain. I think James took her autonomy in making the final decision in Silent Hill. I think he murdered her. There's a fine line between murder and assisted suicide, and I think he fell on the murder side of it.
Yeah, I feel like it's actually not even that fine.
Yeah, I guess that's
like
true.
It's not.
I guess that's true.
George, I think you are totally right in your reasoning, and what it comes down to for me is essentially a question of genre. You know, this is another kind of Alan Wake thing. Is like, I think there is another story where the Leave ending would have really fit, and we could have kind of like grappled with James's guilt, but also ultimately this being, you know, not as horrible a thing he's done as maybe he feels like it is. But like, I just don't think that's the story that Silent Hill 2 is telling. You know, like, I think essentially the rest of Silent Hill 2 is so rotten that the redemptiveness of the Leave ending feels a little out of place. You know, it's not that it's like a bad story beat, but just that it doesn't seem to match with the rest of the story for me. But that being said, I think we're really invested in reading this as a very rotten game. And so if you were reading it more as, you know, like something else or something kind of walking between genres or whatever, I totally get how you could, you know, have a more positive reading on the Leave ending than we do.
For sure. How do you feel about Dr. Kevorkian?
Great name.
It's the most something rotten take of all time. One of us coming on here and be like, Kevorkian innocent.
I think it's possible.
I was reading about assisted suicide not long ago. You know, it's becoming increasingly more legal across the United States.
Yeah, but then there's like weird shit about it in Canada specifically. They're kind of, it's like it's legal, and then it's people are like maybe I truly don't know enough about it to know kind of what the right political stance to take on it is. But I know there is like controversy.
Yeah, I said the United States, which is the only country that matters. USA, baby.
All right.
Not Canada.
Have you ever read the book A Monster Calls, which was made into a movie a while ago?
No.
So there is fair warning, I'm going to spoil the book A Monster Calls. But it's like, it's a kid's book, kind of. It's like a, you know, a young, like, teens book. That is about a kid with his mom has a terminal illness, and he keeps seeing this monster, and the monster is kind of a representation of the illness, you think, or whatever. And then the kind of like the thing that happens at the end that is this like really incredible and moving beat for the book is like, it is very Silent Hill-y in that the monster is kind of like a manifestation of the kid's guilt, but like what the kid ultimately has to admit, like why he's feeling guilty, is he has thought like in some ways it would be easier if my mom died. You know, that like living with her kind of terminally ill in a hospital for like months and months is so hard on me, and it's like really traumatic seeing her there, and I sometimes kind of wish that it was just over. And then the monster is kind of like, I'm not so monstrous, that's an okay thing to think, or whatever. But it's like, it's this really complex idea that I was very surprised to see in a kid's book of being like, you know, the monster is not, what if your mom dies? The monster is like feeling so bad that you don't feel like you're, you know, having the right emotions attached to this.
I think that's a very interesting idea that comes up in media a lot. Gone Girl, which I recently watched, has a great scene where Ben Affleck's character says, when I thought she was gone, I was so relieved. And you can tell he feels a little guilty about that, even though he fucking hates his wife with all his guts. That's a great scene.
And if his wife was gone, he'd get to keep fucking Emily Ratajkowski with no guilt. Ben Affleck in Gone Girl may be a James Sunderland-esque character.
No. We haven't really talked about Gone Girl. Jacob loves this movie. I just recently watched it for the first time. Nick Innocent, bro. He's not a good guy.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. He's a guy who sucks. Like, he
does not suck on a James level. Amy sucks on a James level. She fucking kills Doogie Howser 2 seconds after he comes in her by slitting his throat, and then she fucking Slayer bathes in blood. That's a James Sunderland as much.
Doogie Howser, definitely not innocent in that movie.
He's fine. He's just a little creepy. I don't think he actually was stalking her.
I think that the point of that scene is like he is like implying sexual violence.
That's fair.
I think that movie is really interesting. I haven't read the book. I assume the book is interesting in the same way, in that, like, you know, Rosamund Pike in that movie is kind of the explicit bad guy, but like the implicit bad guy is still kind of like patriarchy, you know, that she is like surrounded by these kind of like very potentially violent men, and then she is the one actually doing the violence. And like, hey, look, she is not innocent, but I just think that is a movie filled with guys who suck.
I agree. I also think it hates women a little bit too, despite being written by a woman.
I think about that all the time, because it's like, I don't think that you should read that movie from like an incel lens.
Sure.
But if you were inclined to, then like you could do it so easily.
I don't think it like hates women in a misogynistic way, right? I think it hates women in an interesting way.
Kind of an equal opportunity
Yeah,
way.
but like, you know, there are definitely like films where the woman is the murderer, but like it rocks. And Gone Girl is like, women kind of suck too, you know? Or like this specific woman, like she kind of fucking sucks. Like she's got a lot of bad shit going on, but she's giving and getting that bad shit. It's a wild fucking movie, man.
It's a wild movie. Charlie says, I'd like to start this by saying I found your podcast after a really rough time in my life, and despite the heavy subject matter you often discuss, it helped me get my mind off the heartbreak I was going through. I want to say thank you both for getting me through that. With that out of the way, I want to ask if you guys have, how you guys find the time to play all these games, because I have a huge backlog and I'm having trouble getting through it, and I was wondering how you guys do it. Well, you heard our discussions at the beginning of it. I think Blake and I's jobs are both playing video games, even if they are not playing video games for this podcast specifically. So we're a little more used to it. Also, we have a hard deadline. You know, it's like you gotta play it or you're letting someone else down.
Yeah, I mean, I won't speak for you. You play so many more video games than I do, just in your normal life and for your job. Because your job is way more focused on, your day job is way more focused on playing video games than mine, which is not very focused on playing games. So the majority of my game playing is actually for Something Rotten, which makes it a little easier because it's not like I'm playing Something Rotten and I'm also trying to play 3 other new games throughout the year. That occasionally happens, but like not as often as you. So like a lot of my just normal game playing is just like, I'm going to play a game for an hour tonight, and it's just the Something Rotten game, which sometimes sucks. Oftentimes lately. Been great.
Also, they add, I don't want to leave off, Blake, you should read Fire Punch by Tatsuki Fujimoto. It's amazing and weird and rotten in hell.
If I'm correct, that's the One Punch Man writer. This is their thing before One Punch Man. Yeah. You heard of this? I've been meaning to read it.
No?
I've been meaning to read it. So, Charlie, thank you for the reminder.
Wow, that guy just writes stories with punch in the title.
You ever seen the old video of him as a kid he uploaded to YouTube? It's like, I learned how to levitate or whatever.
No.
Dude, this guy's a classic internet troll. I gotta send you this. Hold on. I assume if you just Google Tatsuki Fujimoto levitate, it'll pop up. Oop, I typed a K instead of an L, and Kevin Spacey was auto-suggested. Chainsaw Man author tries to levitate. It's a 15-second video.
Oh, okay, I'm watching. Now I'll proceed to levitate, he says. This video, the bottom is totally cut off. And he just jumped. He didn't. I thought he was gonna like stand on a chair. He just jumped.
Yeah. So that's the current mangaka behind one of the most important mangas of the last 5 years. They're uploading a truly hilarious.
That
YouTube
rules.
video.
I love that now YouTube's been around long enough that you can see the stupid uploads of people who are now like famous and influential.
Here's the thing: in 20 years, we'll have the first TikTok president. It's gonna be a trip. Which previous Something Rotten protagonist would do best at a stay in Silent Hill, and which would do worst? And toward what end of the spectrum says Travis Touchdown? This comes from Devesh. The best is James Cash, because he just wouldn't give a fuck. He'd just be like, all right.
That's true.
Whatever.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna go fucking kill everyone, and then okay, the game's over. Bye. Who would do the worst? It's a tie between Max Payne and Estacado. What's Estacado's first name? From The Darkness.
Oh, Jamie?
Jamie?
What's his name?
No, it is.
Jackie.
It's a tie between Max Payne and Jackie Estacado because they're so fucking depressed.
Yeah, I mean, Hellblade is essentially a Silent Hill game already. Right. You know, it's
Forgot
like
about that.
Senua's doing really bad in Hellblade because she is essentially in Silent Hill. I just want to pose an idea to you.
Okay.
How fucking crazy would Lynch's Silent Hill be from Gated Lynch?
Oh my god, that game would be unplayable, dude. Could you imagine? Holy shit. The thing that's great about Silent Hill 2 is, like, there'll be, like, one enemy in 10 minutes. It'll be the scariest thing of all time. Lynch, the first 4 seconds of that game would be 3,000 enemies. Like, it would, oh my god, yeah.
Did you see the story from just yesterday when we're recording this about the Bored Ape conference where they all like were blinded by UV lights? That's what Lynch's Silent Hill would be. It would come out of your computer. It would just be like, you're blind now.
Here's my idea about Travis Touchdown in Silent Hill. He would immediately kill himself because in No More Heroes, the first second he has any pushback from anybody, which does happen at the very end of the game, he completely crumbles. So, like, Silent Hill would be like, hey, what's up? Are you sure you're a good dude? And he'd be like, I'm out. I'm not doing this. I'll see you later.
Yeah, it's like, I do think that Travis Touchdown is more... I think that people would do better in Silent Hill if they were kind of no thoughts, head empty. And I think Travis is like a dumb guy, which would work in his favor. But I also think he has no backbone. And so, he would just... I mean, he would do what I would do in a horror movie, which is kill myself immediately.
Yeah.
You know, whereas people are like, oh, we need to survive the next, 5 years being haunted. I'd be like, I don't. See ya.
Bro, you know, it's... something I like to do late at night is just watch those garbage YouTube videos, which are just like 40-minute compilations called Scariest Footage V83. Love it. And you watch them, and like, if a video's 40 minutes long, you watch 38 minutes of the dumbest shit you've ever seen and 2 minutes of the scariest shit you've ever seen in your entire life. And those 2 minutes are always like two dudes in Ireland being like, oh, I'm going to go to a hotel where 4 billion people died. And, like, the fact they walk around those for an hour is always so insane to me. Because I'm like, I would not go into the parking lot of that building. And I think that's the issue with people like Senua. She's like, well, I guess I gotta live here in Silent Hill. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, if I was James, I'd be like, I don't care that much. I killed my wife. I'm over it. I'm leaving Silent Hill.
Well, and that's why the in-water ending is the best ending.
That's right. But I think James Cash would be like, I don't care.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. Hannah writes in and says, this season prompted me to replay Silent Hill 2 this year. Just finished an in-water game, and I'm probably going to try for the dog ending. Hell yeah. Now that you've touched on one of the Konami titans, would you ever consider Metal Gear for something rotten? I think there's a lot of rot to be got in that franchise, but I think in particular Peace Walker as well as the 2 MGS5s are definitely pretty rotten. Love the pod. Keep doing what you're doing.
Can I answer this one?
Sure.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Moving on.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
What are the 2 MGS5s? That confuses me.
Well, Ground Zeroes.
Oh, right.
Because Ground Zeroes, I think, is
rotten.
Is actually much more rotten than MGS5.
Ground Zeroes is the one with the vagina bomb, right?
That is correct.
It's also my favorite mid-70s 42nd Street film, Vagina Bomb.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I first experienced the Silent Hill franchise this year while I was sick with a rancid combination of tonsillitis and the flu. I've had tonsillitis. I've broken a lot of bones. Tonsillitis, worst pain I've ever been in. Since the first 3 games essentially do not exist anymore, sadly I watched a silent playthrough of them online. Delirious from exhaustion and discomfort, a perfect time to absorb media obsessed with decay, sickness, and the inability to tell the real from the fake. Needless to say, it was an interesting experience. Highly recommend it.
Yeah, everyone go out there and get tonsillitis and the flu so you can experience this.
Everything about this franchise I am obsessed with now, but something that I cannot help but notice is the game's apparent fear of sex, specifically the physical act itself. In these games, the act of sex is broken down to its basic and primal form, bodies of meat violently smacking into one another, and insertion, a a subsequently disgusting and repulsive act that never brings any warmth or care. The games are constantly trying to remind you of the inherent violence of this tender act, and while there is obviously a lot of extra context going on, I cannot help but think about all the protruding holes, jutting pistons, and the series' willingness to associate anything sexual with diseased or pummeled pieces of flesh. See Mary's disease, Pyramid Head's butcher outfit, and Heather's injuries. As an asexual person who does not like physical contact, it never ceases to freak me out. My question for Something Rotten, then, is twofold. One, what do you think about this franchise's fear of the human body? And two, has any piece of media ever freaked you out so much from its depiction of something that it introduced a new fear, discomfort inside of you? Thanks for the wonderful show. Most recently, Blake got me to check out Shozen Fukui's awesome work, and now I'm a proud owner of the Blu-ray copy of 964 Pinocchio. Wanted to include that last part because that rocks. I don't even own that Blu-ray, so shouts out. What do you think about it's scared? Like most men, it's scared of sex.
So this is interesting, and I'm really glad that Jacob from Australia wrote in with this because you talked about in Silent Hill 3 the game and thus Heather being scared of sex, which is not how I read it necessarily, because I saw it much more as the omnipresent threat of sexual violence, which is, I think, I want to really separate that from just fear of sex in general, because, and so I do think, and I'm not saying but I do think that both of those things are fears that you can work with, and I read it much more as sexual violence, but I do think it's interesting that the game would be kind of sex negative in general in this way. I
think I read it both ways. Granted, I do not have the lived experience of a woman, much less a teenage woman, but I think my reading of Heather, I think I said this on the show, she's a virgin, and I don't think the game's not explicit in that, but I think you can pretty easily take it that way. And when you're a virgin, you're scared of having sex. And I also assume if you're a young woman, or any woman really, you're scared of sexual violence. I think it's dealing with both at the same time. It's like sex is just this ever-present concept for her, both in that she probably wants to have it. She's probably a little nervous to have it. She's also terrified it will be used violently against her. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It's like Heather's an interesting protagonist in these games because she is not really experiencing the same level of guilt as the other protagonists, and so while I think that it is a totally fair reading to kind of think about the internalized guilt about having sex at all, it's not something that I really get from Heather's character.
Sure.
The horror of the game seems to be more specifically focused on just what being a woman in the world is like. But so it's just it's something that I've been thinking about, where it's I don't think that there is no I don't know that Heather is scared of sex as a general concept as much as just kind of the Silent Hillification of just it will never show you anything tender or warm at all. That being said, these games they're incredibly fleshy, and they are incredibly, as I think that Jacob has an accurate characterization in that fear of the human body, that almost all of the bosses are human figures that are broken in some way, which I
think this is going to sound a little reductive, but bear with me. I think the depiction of sex in these games, on the one hand, is just a genre trope. I mean, horror,
you have sex, you die.
Well, no, that's not exactly what I'm saying. I mean, there is the slasher aspect where sex is sexy, and then there's the whole final girl concept, but I think a lot of horror, much haunted houses make you scared of the normalcy of your home, sex in horror films can exist to be a point of fear. It's something that you are likely used to, or at least familiar enough with, so if you flip it on its head, it becomes inherently becomes inherently scary. I think that's what it's doing here. I think not shallowly. I think the game has like is trying to say things about sex. But I think that's what it's doing, and I think like that's an interesting place a lot of horror films go. A movie we've talked about numerous times in relation to Silent Hill is Raw, which deals a lot with virginity and sexual violence and how like that, and just sex in general, and how that is a constant concern for young women. Takashi Miike's work, which is not inherently horror, rarely shows sex as a loving act, and I have always thought he has an interesting view of sex and how it's depicted in his films. So I think it's a trope they're playing on in a way that like games haven't done well, or at least not like big budget games that this kind of does well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, it's a really hard line to walk, I think, because it's like there are vanishingly few good sex scenes in games of like actually showing, you know, human warmth and intimacy or whatever. Usually games are just kind of lean into the objectification of like, haha, you get to see some titties now.
Hell yeah.
But also there aren't a lot of games that have done well, like, you know, specifically like a fear of sexual violence that hasn't also felt exploitative in some way.
What is a game with a good sex scene? God of War 2?
Wolfenstein: The New Order.
Yes. Yes.
You know, which God of War game has the best sex scene? It's got to be 3.
God of War.
When you fuck Aphrodite and her two like maids watch.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Wow, what a franchise.
Yeah, Wolfenstein has a good one. Did they do it in New Colossus too?
I don't think. No, she's Anya's naked in New Colossus, but it's not a sex scene. Well, okay, actually, New Colossus has like a jokey sex scene where there's the one of the characters fucks the like German girl who kind of was the daughter of. It's like you find them in the submarine. It's not like bad, but it is like it's kind of played for laughs. I think, gosh, what games have good sex scenes?
None. New Colossus, and that's it.
I haven't. You've played more Cyberpunk than me.
Oh,
does Cyberpunk have like interesting sex scenes?
Yeah, for sure. Oh God, I can't remember her name. The character, I only romanced one character, and the sex scene I had with her was like beautiful and hot and like.
Well, like I was trying to Google sex scenes in games. I just typed sex scenes and hit enter on Google.
Hell yeah! How'd that work out for you?
Probably Baldur's Gate has good ones, but neither of us have played that enough to know. Anyway, the second part of their question was, has any piece of media freaked you out so much from its depiction of something that it introduced a new fear/discomfort inside you? Yeah, constantly. Most of my fears come from something scary that I saw in a movie.
Judy Alvarez is the character I was trying to think of. That's the character I romanced. Like what? Any specifics?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I was always just... as a kid, you know, I would just be scared of like there's a monster in the dark and the monster would be whatever scary thing I saw most recently, you know. So Voldemort from Harry Potter 1 when his face is all melty, Raiders of the Lost Ark when the faces melt off, right. You know, plenty of weird things. I think everyone feels scared driving behind log trucks because of that Final Destination scene.
I don't have long hair anymore, so this isn't particularly a problem, but I used to be a hair chewer, which is pretty gross.
Oh.
And I'll tell you what, bringing it up again, baby. Raw. Make you never put hair in your fucking mouth again. Good God. Also, anytime I'm around a staircase, I'm like, damn, remember when that little girl from Ju-on drug her bloody corpse down those stairs? Scary. Don't like it. Don't like stairs anymore. Oh, also... Inside and the original Halloween and maybe even The Strangers, just things in the background when it's dark, just shit in the windows, not jump scaring you, just kind of hovering there. Not a fan. Used to not bother me, now it bothers me. Anyway, not the Bo Burnham inside, the French film La Intruder. I watched all the cutscenes of the game, and a notable scene was the one where James has to hide in the closet from Pyramid Head as it attacks 2 other monsters. The scene was uploaded and described as the mannequin rape scene. I certainly thought that the way Pyramid Head was moving and mashing their bodies together looked sexual, as brief as the moment is. Obviously, I'm not the only one, but people were arguing in the comments that it wasn't. So what do y'all think? I know James' sexual frustration is more so represented through Maria, but I don't discount the idea that we see the absolute worst of him through Pyramid Head. If we include Angela's story as well, the theme of sexual violence seems to reoccur in multiple places. That being said, I still haven't played the game and I'm way too scared to, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I wanted to include this because we did call it a rape in our episode with Drucker, and even though I think we should maybe not take everything Masahiro Ito says as law on his Twitter, he's the one who designed and I believe animated the scene, and I'm almost certain he has come out and said this is not a rape scene.
This scene has always been kind of interesting because the most common reading of it is that he's raping the mannequin figures, and it's kind of like it's very easy to see where that reading would have come from, and a lot of other Silent Hill stuff. Obviously, Angela's whole plot line, is about sexual assault and whatever. But yeah, I think it's I think it's kind of taken as canon in a way that maybe it shouldn't.
I think it's definitely using like sexually dominant kind of like imagery, but that doesn't inherently mean a sexual assault is happening. I mean, I don't know what to, like, there is a creepy reading of it that, like, Pyramid Head is just kind of fucking with the bodies just to fuck with them, which is kind of scary.
Yeah, well, I'm just looking at different people's readings where, I don't know, it is, watching that scene, it's really, I mean, I think its power is in its abstraction, where it's there's no clear answer on, like, what he's doing, and also the mannequin legs are so like non-human that it's hard to tell like this is what they're doing because they're just 4 legs. I think Haven, I think you're kind of, I don't know, I think that it's like it's right to question it, to be like, I don't know if this should be, I don't think that should just be taken as like, well, obviously this is the one thing that's happening there.
Here's an interesting thought about Pyramid Head. Post Silent Hill 2, especially the movies and his other appearances, Pyramid Head is often shown as like a bona fide Billy Badass in a lot of things. But like playing Silent Hill 2, the original one, he's kind of a goofball, especially in this scene when he just like kind of moves around all funny like. I don't think it makes him less scary. It makes him weirder for sure, which is scary. But like, he was not the hulking monstrosity in this game I thought he was going to be. He was just kind of like a loser.
Yeah, it's like in the Silent Hill movie, when he shows up, he is essentially God. It's like there is not even a hope of like defeating him, and it's like, yeah, he's just like a weird guy who's very strong, but like does not, there's, gosh, I can't remember which YouTube video this was, so my apologies, but it's like someone has pointed out that it's like a lot of times he's not even acting. It's like if he wanted to kill James, there are several times that he could have done so and didn't, and often he's kind of like helping him in weird ways, like throwing him, in the hospital thing.
He's the big homie. We never talk about this. He's your friend in that game.
Yes, it's like the Pyramid Head mythos is very detached from like Pyramid Head's game appearance. Mark says, my take on the HD collection is this. They're a good thing. Right now on my Xbox Series X, I can download the backwards compatible version and play these 2 classic games. Yeah, I know the fog is weird and the shadows are harsher. I've watched the Digital Foundry's videos. I know all the issues. But as someone who's played the PS2 originals and the PC versions, I'm here to say it's not that bad. I played them both this year and was completely absorbed. Creeping around the apartments illuminated only by my torch, I wasn't taken out of the experience at all and was still fully engaged and spooked. I worry at how many people never got a chance to play these classic games because of the discourse around the HD version. People are told never play these versions. It's a train wreck, ruins the games. And maybe because of the chore around downloading and running old PC games or emulating them, they will never play them. Slightly different thought. How is this game so scary while also being so easy? The rising music, the creeping atmosphere, my heart is pounding and the dread increasing, then I find a monster, down it in 3 shots, and move on. But the atmosphere isn't tarnished. I'm still scared and my heart hasn't stopped thudding. This audio design and pacing of the game is outstanding.
Yeah, I've thought about that last point a lot, Mark, and I agree. But I think you answered your own question. The rising music, the creepy atmosphere. It's a
Yeah.
masterclass.
In general, I think that the HD collection perspective is a good one to have. You know, the
I
people
agree,
complaining about the HD collections are mostly diehard fans. I think the biggest loss is probably just different vocal performances. You know, like I think the vocals are very, very core to the original Silent Hill 2. But yeah, it's like, you know, it's the same thing as kind of like it's worse to have not played them at all than to play a kind of slightly lesser version of them. It's still, you still get to play Silent Hill 2, which is one of the best games ever made.
We got someone writing in. I can't remember who it was. But they wrote in about how they played this game on a CRT and then rubbed it in my face. And I was like, damn it. Yeah, I thought that was good to include because, you know, maybe it would have saved me some headache if I would have just played them on my Xbox instead of going into the Game Informer storage facility and digging through boxes to find these games.
Yeah, but that's so cool. No one else can do that.
That's true. Well, like 30 people can if you work at Game Informer. So get a job at Game Informer. Then move to Minneapolis. Last question from Alessio. What's the first game you killed someone in, and did it impact you in any way?
This is such a weird question.
A good question.
Because it's, it is, but it's like, I have no idea. I mean, I'm just trying to think of what are the earliest video games that I played.
I don't think any video game murder, even when I was 5 years old, has really impacted me in like a profound way. But the one that comes to mind that I remember being like, what the fuck, is Shogo Mobile Armor Division, which I've talked about on this show before. When I shot someone and they exploded into jibs.
Yeah.
They're like the bloody chunks that kind of look like when you cut up a tomato. I was like, what the fuck is this? I was like 5 years old. I remember that very vividly.
It's like, I'm sure the first game, I mean, it's like, you know, my first game with quote-unquote violence was probably like Lego Star Wars or something, you know, but it's like, that doesn't really count. I'm sure that it was an online Flash game, you know, that I was playing and was sudden, because those had no ratings, there was no kind of parental control on them, and there would be, you would just click on something and find like shocking violence. I'm trying to think of like, you know, there's that the Madness online Flash series, and then they had like a game that you could play, Madness Interactive. But I have no idea. It's like, I'm sure it was an online Flash game, and I'm sure that I was kind of initially like looking around to be like, are my parents going to see this? You know, because it was like, I knew that it was inappropriate. You know, that was my feeling. It's like, I knew that I shouldn't be doing that, but I wasn't like, I don't think I was like grossed out personally. And I can't really remember a time when I played a game and was like, this seems like too much for me, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I've never played the original Silent Hill, but my dad bought it when I was in elementary school, and both my parents checked it out, and I did not watch it with them because they're like, nah, you ain't checking this shit out, little boy. But I remember them being like, fuck this shit. And I think that was the first time I was like, can a game be evil? You know, I remember it kind of like sitting in the back of my mind for a long time, just being like, it really freaked my mom out.
I remember, this is slightly different, but for my cousin who's significantly older than me, for his bar mitzvah, my grandma bought him an Xbox, and I once went upstairs in my grandparents' house, probably when I was about 7, and I saw them playing Halo on my like grandpa's TV, and it's like the first time I can remember seeing a first person shooter, and I couldn't even like conceptualize the perspective. You know, it was like I looked at the screen and I like did not know what was happening, because I was like, where's the character you're controlling? You know, like, where's the little guy running around? And I just have this scene where it's like, and I can kind of remember that and being like, okay, yeah, no, they were holding a needler. I can remember. But when I first saw it, it was like, I didn't know what a first person game was.
Yeah. Have you ever heard the story of Leo Vader being at like a sleepover? and he wasn't allowed to play M-rated games. And at the sleepover, they played like Halo 2 or Halo 3, and he went home to his parents and cried because he played an M-rated game.
Was it because he felt guilty or because he was like so scared?
Because he felt guilty.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, like, here's the problem with me. I'm a born gamer, Jacob.
You're a born freak.
I used to like this is true. I would sit next to my dad at our old computer when I was like 6 years old and just watch him play Max Payne all day, every day. And he played No One Lives Forever, and I would just sit there. He played Deus Ex. And I was just watching death constantly. The ones I remember, though, are like movie scenes that really fucked me up. Like, oh God, what is the shark movie? Deep Blue Water? Deep Blue Sea?
Deep Blue Sea.
Where Samuel...
My head is like a shark's fin.
I've never seen the movie other than this quick scene.
But where the shark jumps out and gets Samuel Jackson and just like slams him up
Exactly.
and down.
I talked about this somewhere recently, but I was at a neighbor's house on where I grew up, and they had that movie on in the living room. I was like just walking by, and that scene happened, and I literally ran out their front door. They live 2 doors down from me. I ran down my street screaming, literally screaming. Despite the fact, like, I have been obsessed with horror my entire life. I was so bad with horror when I first started watching it, probably because I watched it too little. Like, I remember watching the original Halloween, and my dad took me to a fruit market at like 1 p.m, sunny, beautiful day, and I was genuinely petrified. And it wasn't even Halloween. That's the fucked up part. It was summer. Michael Myers famously only comes at 1 day of the year. And I was so scared he was going to get me on like June 3rd. So those are the ones that stick out to me the most. But video games.
That rules.
Video games, I'm a boring gamer, dude. I don't give a shit. I was playing Max Payne.
Yeah.
The scene I remember in Max Payne when I was a little kid being like, what's going on there? Is the scene where there's an implied blowjob. And I was like, why'd that woman disappear off screen? I remember that very vividly.
Why is Sam Lake making that face?
No, Sam Lake doesn't get the blowjob. It's like some boss.
I do remember, this was much, much later, but I do remember the first time that I shot someone in the head in Max Payne 3, because that game has more detailed blood decals than any game before or since, and seeing essentially someone's like eye socket explode because you shoot them was like still memorable, even though I had been gaming for 18 years at that point.
Jacob Glenn Geller, Glenn Ross, true or false? You little freak, you little pervert. True or false?
I guess in video games, true.
You little violence perv. Has anything in movies or video games shocked you recently? Been like, what the fuck?
Oh, well, I mean, movies shock me all the time because I'm scared of them.
All movies?
Like, actually, there's
all movies, like
all movie. I'm scared of a moving image on a screen.
You would hate the Museum of the Moving Image right next to my house.
I bet. I mean, this did not shock me in like I couldn't sleep after, but there's a scene in the animated show Scavenger's Reign that I sent you and was telling you to watch, where it's like in the first episode a character gets like inhales a fungus and then kind of has this vision of themselves dying, and it's like really quite grotesque, and there's a scene where just like all of her guts just like fall out of her body. And I was like, whoa. But I'm trying to think of like the last horror movie or violent movie I saw where I needed to like look away. I don't know. You know that scene in John Wick 3 where he pushes the knife into the guy's eyeball, like slowly? Great scene. I still, you know, my ultimate like movie ick, like I can barely watch it, is the classic French surreal film Un Chien Andalou,
Salvador Dali,
where they
baby.
cut the eyeball with a laser.
Not a laser, a straight razor.
Oh no! Why did I say a laser? A razor.
His switches to the lamb's eyeball. Great stuff. The ants crawl out of the palm of the hand later. Awesome movie.
Yeah, great movie. A rotten movie.
Violence is so cool. We should talk about this more. I love violence. There's a Something Rotten channel on the Jacob Geller Discord, which I'm a frequent viewer and user of. And for a long time, people love to, before we announce what we're playing next, people like to speculate what we're going to play on the next season. And for a long time, people saw, I have my Discord settings where it shows what I'm playing, which I should really change considering I play things that people aren't supposed to know I'm playing. But for a long time, I was playing the game Silent Hunter 3. And people were like, in the Discord, they're like, what are they playing next season? Because Silent Hunter 3 is like a naval strategy game. And people are like, are they doing a fucking Silent Hunter 3 season? This is crazy. And what it was is the completely legal, non-Gore Verbinski Pirates of the Caribbean version of Silent Hill 3 I was playing on my PC, which I got completely legally from Konami, my friends who sent it to me. That's what it was displaying on Discord as, was Silent Hunter 3.
Silent Hunter 3.
And it was Silent Hill 3 the whole time. I fucking duped y'all. Got your ass. Did you notice that?
Got him. I did.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, Blake's playing Silent Hunter 3 a lot.
Yeah, I wasn't, is the thing.
Thank you, everyone, for writing in with questions. Listen to our bonus episode with Tales if you want to hear us talk way more about movies and books and music. And also find out what we're doing for next season. That'll be starting soon.
50th episode coming up.
50th episode coming up. See you, everyone.
Bye.
Silent Hill. You promised you'd take me there again someday. But you never did. Well, I'm alone there now. In our special place. Waiting for you.